in Philanthropy at Plains Art Museum. First of all, I want to thank Margie and Julie and Carol for participating this year. This is a really important topic, and it's finding a new ground. It's really an explosive element of the world of philanthropy, and not just the financial side of it. The volunteerism, the working in the community is also seeing a rapid increase, and it is mostly women who are driving that. I'm Sandy Thompson. I'm the Director of Possibilities at the Plains Art Museum. We are open. We're actually seeing an increase in attendance of late. So if you want to come down and see 3 incredible exhibitions, particularly that of Shakaya Booker, I really encourage you to do that. So I'm going to start out with some rapid comments about women in philanthropy. So what does a female philanthropist look like today? She's learned philanthropy young. She believes wealth comes with responsibility. She educates herself. She takes risks. She's all about return on investment, and she invests in system change. And she is, most importantly, empathetic. So here are some stats, and Becky will have some that are similar. We may disagree a little bit, but we're pretty close. Women now control 32% of all the wealth in the world and 51% of the wealth in the United States. In 2019, women held $11 trillion in assets, and they're expected to have $30 trillion in assets by 2030. Compared to 2015, there's 30% more women who are involved in the investment world. Curious little topic, 26% of all cryptocurrency owners are women. And of those who are crypto curious, about 53% of those are women. And 44% of high net wealth women in the United States are female. So why is this happening? Well, number one, women are not getting married as early, and they're increasingly not having children. And when they do have children, they're having fewer children. And we're seeing a rapid increase in women being more educated and longer educated than men. In 2019, half of the college age, actually now it's a little bit higher, I think it's like 53% of the women were college educated. In 2020, they made up, finally, 50% of the entire workforce. In 1980, there were only 2 females who were the presidents or CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Today, and it's still got a long way to go, it's 37. So fundraising, in many respects, has been stalled because of guys like me, white men. The rules that were created for philanthropy long ago were created by white men for white men. But women don't see themselves as deal makers. They see themselves as partners. Men see themselves as deal makers. Women are much more relational, and men are much more transactional. And we're seeing philanthropy change to empathetic giving rather than status giving. Women are, not surprisingly, more joy-oriented than us. There's less ego involved when women are participating in philanthropy. And women are much better at collaborations. We can attest to that at the museum. many of our community-based partnerships are with organizations that are led by women. The last thing I want to talk about is the Mackenzie Scott Jewett effect. Everyone here is probably aware that Mackenzie Scott is now the second wealthiest woman in the United States. And she's been changing the landscape of philanthropy, and quickly. She's moving the paradigm to trust-based giving. She trusts the grantee to make the best decisions. She has a unique way of identifying who she wants to give to, and it's almost always no strings attached, because she believes the grantee knows what the metrics are to determine whether that project was successful or not. She's making philanthropy much more accessible by being based in trust-based giving. She's really encouraging other women to be much more bolder in what they support. It's going to be women like Mackenzie Scott and Lauren Jobs and Alice Walton and others who are going to be leading the charge. And every single one of those women has at the top of her list to have women supported in their projects who are coming to those women, those wealthy women, for support. One of the things that I found really fascinating is in an editorial is, what do men have to do in this new landscape to make it more equitable, more effective, and more just? And the answer is, get out of the way, let women lead. And also, men need to really examine how they can be more empathetic. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Becky Wallen at Bell Bank. It's all yours, Becky.
Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate that. And again, after Sandy's introduction there, and just to share a little bit about who I am, Becky Wallen, I lead our philanthropic solutions endeavors here at Bell Bank, work in our wealth management division as an accredited financial counselor, certified financial planner, and have my master's in financial planning here from NDSU, and use that education and experience to help guide clients and community members in their wealth planning, charitable giving, and also working very closely with a number of the nonprofits in our community. Just going to share my screen quickly and introduce our guest today. So joining on the panel. Yes? Okay, joining on the panel, Dr. Julie Blehm, Senior Medical Director of Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Dakota and the University of North Dakota School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Margie Bailly, Retired Executive Director of the Fargo Theater and the force behind the Culinary Center. And Carol Schlossman, MBA of Carol Schlossman Consulting. Thank you, ladies, so much for being with us this afternoon. And Sandy shared a number of excellent stats and points. You know, I certainly don't want to dispute any numbers. Really, the bottom line here is that women are changing the philanthropy game, whether it's a factor of dollars given or engagement in philanthropy and nonprofits. Global wealth, as we know, is growing by leaps and bounds. Basically, we can go with Sandy's trillions and trillions, or noting here as well. And some of these leaders are really storming through the globe in their scope of giving, just as these leaders here today have really made an impact in the Fargo-Moorhead community. Women are more visible in philanthropy today because of those that have been fighting for a seat at the table across every industry for decades. And, you know, these folks are continuing to do the work. When we talk about the Mackenzie Scott shift here throughout 2020 and last December, when we started to feel the impact of some of those gifts to organizations in our community, initially receiving them completely anonymously and the no strings attached, it was just a wonder and a blessing here locally. And we've also noticed, as Deborah Mesh here of Indiana University's Lilly Family School of Philanthropy Institute notes, women who engaged in philanthropy, traditionally were behind the scenes volunteers and doing the unrecognized work. The men tended to be the faces, but we've really come into our own. Another great example would be Melinda Gates, having stepped from behind the scenes back in 2008 to lead the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, continuing those efforts after her divorce from Bill, and also doing things like starting her own investment company and the female philanthropy organization Maverick Collective, and highlighting some of these endeavors in her book from 2019, Moment of Lift: How Empowering Women Changes the World. Thinking about all of that is empowering, and it brings strength really to the efforts that all of us are bringing forth in our communities. With that, if we could initially begin, Julie, Carol, Margie, with maybe your introduction and a highlight of your thoughts on giving as you are today, or where you began along the way. Julie, would you care to go first?
Yes, now that I've unmuted. Well, I do have to clarify, I retired from Blue Cross Blue Shield about 16 months ago, so I'm no longer senior medical director there. I still do cover resident clinics, so I work with the University of North Dakota and Sanford, but per diem, just when they need some extra help. So I was raised in a family that didn't have a lot of money, but they were active in the community. They volunteered to help with things. They gave money when they were able to afford that. So I have to admit, I came from that background. And when my husband was still alive, we both had the philosophy that we have been given many gifts and we should give some back to the community. We should be giving back. Plus, I'm a real believer that we should be active members of our community. We may all do that in different ways, but I think it's important. So I believe in financial giving, and I also believe in volunteering. I think volunteering is very important, in part because you then become part of the community, but it also has a lot of benefits to, I think, at least to me personally. I really enjoy volunteering. I meet many amazing people, and I find philanthropy, whether financial or volunteer work, is incredibly satisfying to me. And so I often think I get more back from my giving than I actually give in the community.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. Carol, how about you?
Are similar. I think you'll find that thread, and Sandy had pointed that out, that many of us started out in life with a philosophical context of giving. And for me, that started very early on, when that quarter every week had to go in an envelope and we had to give it to somebody. Or our neighborhood created a circus and we gave it to the North Dakota Epilepsy Foundation, I think it was. So we started early in our whole neighborhood in doing things that gave back to our community. As time went on, there was a period when you're young, you have kids, young kids, and it limits your ability to give as much in time and your talent as you probably would love to. And then there's a way of eventually being able to carve that back out and get involved. I believe in giving of your talents, whatever that may be. And I know right now, when I look at the list of people on this call, I mean, these are philanthropic leaders in our community already, so they know this. You give of your talent, you give of your time. And then I think for me, the harder part is when to choose to give money financially for some reason. And so I think that is a sea change with women becoming leaders and feeling more important to control that outcome also. And so I think that's where that sea change is happening with Scott and other leaders. They're helping us as well as our community leaders of women show us how that is done and done very generously.
Thank you. Margie?
Well, I absolutely agree with Carol and Julie in terms of having this modeled as a young child. I grew up in a small town in Iowa, Mount Pleasant, Iowa. My father was a small town general practitioner, and my mom was the community volunteer extraordinaire. And they were both very, very involved in the Southeast Iowa Symphony. My mom developed the membership campaign for it. And my dad played in the symphony actually for a few years. And and he was also on the board for the Iowa Wesleyan College, which was in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. So it was just something that was absolutely a part of our family fabric, totally. My mother was hugely involved in Girl Scouts. I have 4 sisters, so obviously there's an obvious reason there. We had no boys, 5 girls. My mother was so involved in Girl Scouts, in fact, that my youngest sister, Jeannie, who is 10 years younger than I am, when she was about 3 years of age, attempted to stuff my mother's Girl Scout hat down the toilet. And I think she was trying to tell us something, that she needed a little bit more attention and less Girl Scouting. But anyway, they were tremendously involved in the community, tremendously caring people. And you know, it's one of those things where when in preparing for this event today, you think of all those things that made you who you are today. And it was those very, very early experiences. And over the years, it's given me such great pleasure to say to myself, you know, my mom would do this. This is what she would do. And when I get really frustrated with something that's either a volunteer or is a fundraising effort of some kind, I think, you know, what would my mom do? And she'd say, rise above it. Or she'd say, you know, this too will pass, or all those things that moms say. And so she has carried me through all of the challenges and the opportunities and the great joy that I've had in the various projects that I've been involved in. And as Julie and Carol both said, it really does give you such joy to be involved in and make a difference in things that you really, really are passionate about and that you really, really care about. And there's just nothing like that feeling.
Absolutely. And, you know, Margie, thinking about what you said of your mother and drawing on her wisdom and her strength, even in memory, how do you now at this point, and any of you, look to other generations of your family, your kids or grandkids, in involving them on giving and influencing them as well?
You know, our sons are all involved. We have our middle son is very involved in a number of different things in the Moorhead area. And our youngest son is in Fergus Falls as a counselor, school counselor, and they too are involved. And our oldest son and spouses, my oldest son and spouse are in Winnipeg, and Unfortunately, I only know what he's up to via Zoom, but they are all very involved. I think that my husband Dick and I have just always been really passionate about this. Plus, they grew up having me drag them to every meeting in town. It's unbelievable. Our youngest son, when he was about 4, I was on the opera board. We were sitting in the Blue Cross building. Hale Laybourne was leading the meeting, and Nate was under the table eating his hamburger and drinking his malt, and he spilled it all over the floor, and it was the brand new Blue Cross building. So he was dragged all over the place, and he couldn't help but either get inspired or totally turned off. And fortunately, he decided that this was a thing that he wanted to be involved in when he became an adult too.
Yeah, so a bit of osmosis involved as he's under the table there.
Exactly.
I'm not sure if my daughter participates in Special Olympics, and so that's been one of the things I've been very active in. But even she, you know, when there's volunteer things for Special Olympics or something like that, where she feels she can do something, she thinks that's important, or she'll say to me, I think I should help with that. And my son, I'm not quite as certain. He lives in Tucson and has only been there about 5 years. I have no grandchildren. And but he does talk about things he thinks are important. And I am hoping that he is over time becoming more involved in the community of Tucson. He has moved around a lot, so hasn't lived anywhere till Tucson long enough to really get involved. So we'll see now.
To be determined. Carol?
Yeah, absolutely. Children model their family, and our kids certainly model philanthropy. And whether it's being part of a guild that writes for women, produces a publication quarterly of women's writing and art, all the way to working in the school systems, to working with various different philanthropies. One of their companies supports. So there is a tremendous amount of thought by our children in how they spend their time and their efforts in that part of the world. Of their world. I do think it is contagious, and it's not only contagious in your family, it is contagious across the community. And so when you see women leaders giving and leading in the giving and leading in the boardrooms, it changes the way giving happens. So it's not just in your family, it's sharing that across the community and giving opportunities for women to have a path.
Absolutely. We'll go back here and share a little bit more again, just to highlight and looking at under the third bullet, some of the gender differences, and the note that women engage more deeply in giving, conducting more due diligence, as you mentioned there, Carol, looking into things, you know, investing more as part of a group is also a trend. And expecting greater communication and engagement from the charities that we support, and understanding the impact of our gifts. You know, I think back as I've refined my focus on giving and what matters most to me over the years. I remember thinking very early in my career, as I made my first investments in the United Way, for example, that I wanted to focus on women and families. Well, that sounds defined and focused, but it's actually incredibly broad, right? And you still need to do a lot of deep thought and narrowing of options, and what really draws your heartstrings and your purse strings in that direction, and involving others, as you guys have mentioned as well. as you think about that and you know, making those decisions on where to focus your efforts, tell us a little about your deliberations and your process.
Well, one of the first organizations I was quite involved in, which started when we were living in Minot, is the American Diabetes Association. And I must say that was a really good learning experience at the time, because the executive director at the time would talk about, you should really look at how much of the money a nonprofit takes in goes to the work they're doing. So in North Dakota, the American Diabetes Association runs Camp Sue, which is a camp for children with diabetes. And how much of it goes to that or education, and how much goes to administration. So for me, I'm not sure I'd actually thought about that before, but for me, it made me in my future giving also look at, is the organization, is this nonprofit putting the vast majority of the money they are giving or that they are taking in, is that going to the reason for the organization? And when you start looking at that, there's a number of nonprofits that more of the money goes to administration or travel than goes to the actual purpose of the organization. So I always look at that. I also tend to do more local so that I can see in the community that, yes, they really are serving the community and doing what they say they are. So those are the types of things I look at.
Yeah, thank you. Carol, Margie?
You know, I think just at one of the experiences that I had that was profoundly life-changing for me was to be involved in the Center for Parents and Children in its very early years. I was on the board from about 1980 to 86. And then I actually took over as development director of that organization in 1986 or 87. And it was one of the most exciting and fulfilling experiences, both on the side of being a volunteer and on the side of being the professional fundraiser for that organization. And one of the things that I did as a fundraiser, as a paid fundraiser, was develop a project called the Toy Fair, which was the premise of the project was that I ran this through all the school systems and asked them to, at the developmentally appropriate stage, talk to kids about child abuse and neglect and healthy family environments and those kinds of things, and then ask them to give to an organization that really cares about the lives that they're living and the quality of the lives that they're living. And so we would ask kids to bring in their good condition used toys, or to bring a toy that was their special toy, and think about how great it would be if someone else was able to get that as a Christmas gift, that kind of thing. So we had a one-day toy, if I could say that word, toy sale. And it was so much fun. And it was so great to get comments from kids that had donated their toys, and then watch the faces of the kids that were, along with their parents, there for that one-day sale of purchasing toys. And we would have workshops along with that, Lego workshops, that kind of thing. So it was one of those things that did everything for me, which was to see the joy in kids' faces, to see the joy in community faces in general, and then also know that the monies that were raised for that were going back to an organization that, as Julie said, was very accountable, extremely accountable, in terms of making certain that the monies that they raised, the monies that were meant to go back to the community, went back to the community and in effective programming. So I don't know whether that really answers your question, but it's just something that is probably one of the most profoundly moving experiences for me.
Yes, absolutely, Margie. And, thinking about that too, then, Carol, for you, what has helped you make wise decisions when you're looking to give in the community?
Really how an organization affects people it's serving and those outcomes. And as Julie and Margie said, it's the ability of the organization to actually use those dollars very, very wisely. And so taking the time to understand that organization's first through volunteer work and giving of time and your talent, and then even digging deeper when you want to start giving more of the, financially, because giving of the time and talent helps you understand how they're going to treat people. Because if they treat their volunteers well, and they treat their donors well, and they treat the people they serve exemplary, you can be more rest assured that they're going to use those dollars in that same good-hearted way. And so I do look at the whole organization and the ultimate impact that I'm interested in. My background in giving of those 3 areas, it's wide. It's all the way from refugee resettlement when I was quite young, to working with, foundations, to even, the local little things you do in the summer at the lake. So, and now I'm on the Plains Art Board. So you really do find so many ways to investigate the outcomes of your inputs. And I think that's what I want to see as the greatest outcome possible.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. And one of you mentioned the power of giving locally. We're so fortunate in this community to have so many strong nonprofit partners that do the hard work and serve our community every day, and have those opportunities for us to step forward as growing philanthropists and experienced ones to volunteer and use that time and effort, as you mentioned, Carol, to get to know the organization. We're a big small town, is how I often refer to Fargo-Moorhead, and showing up on the front door and asking, how can I help? We may often be surprised at how quickly they'll put us to work, right? So that is really a wonderful benefit, I think, that we have in our community, that maybe we have more so than in large metros sometimes. From there too, getting involved on another level with this group, I know the 3 of you have served the community well as board members here and there. Where do you find yourselves? I know for me, as a person working in the finance field, that if I'm on a board, I'm often tapped on the shoulder to help with the treasurer duties. So we get pigeonholed oftentimes. But how has your board service evolved over the years? Maybe how did you initially get invited to join a board, and then how has that experience grown?
I can answer that. I started out when I arrived in Fargo in 1976, sort of dragged here by my husband to this cold, flat place as I perceived it. I was asked to join the board of the Fargo-Moorhead Opera Company. And it was an extraordinary experience. And I was so blown away that there would be a professional opera company in a town the size of Fargo. It was just absolutely amazing to me. And it really engaged me in this community. It made me do exactly what my mother told me to do, which is bloom where you're planted, even though it's a really, really short growing season. I absolutely loved my experience on the opera board, and we were able to revitalize the Friends of the Opera, which is just a community support group, community of volunteers that did parties and afterglow parties and just celebrated the fact that we had this wonderful opera company there. And kind of to maybe end, I hope it may not be the end of my volunteer career, but I'm on the board for the symphony right now, and it's the same kind of just really, quite frankly, exhilarating opportunity to sell what is one of the things nearest and dearest to my heart, which is the power of music. And, you know, Mozart does make you smarter. I'm totally convinced of that. So I try to listen to as much Mozart as possible. We just had Don Giovanni by the Opera Company, and it was contemporized, and it was absolutely fabulous. So I think to be able to be an advocate for the power of the things that you really believe in, and I really, really believe in the power of the arts to create a fabric of a community that is unique and absolutely attractive. It recruits and retains and does all those kinds of things. And to be a part of that process as a volunteer is fairly extraordinary.
I started with, as I said, the American Diabetes Association, and I got involved there, going out to Camp Sioux as the camp physician, and for a week at a time, and then ended up on their board and doing some fundraising. And that experience was wonderful. I really felt that they were so important for these children who were learning to live with diabetes. And again, the people I met on the board and the things they were doing in the state, I felt were so important. And then I also was active in Minot in the YMCA, which I'm on the YMCA board. I'm chair of the board right now. And I really felt there again, both in Minot and even more in Fargo, what the Y does for the community. I just see it every single day. And as Margie said, I think the arts are critically important for a really rich, active community. And so I served on the opera board and the symphony board. I recently had the male star of Don Giovanni staying with me. So I always tell people now that Don Giovanni stayed at my house. But so though, again, those things are so important in the community. And I've been very active with Concordia. I'm an alum, and I just think all these things are just make our community so much richer all in different ways. So I'm been very happy to serve on the boards.
Board work is really fun, and I think Margie and Julie really gave great examples, and I've experienced the same thing. And I think the key is the relationships. And I got involved first in committee work. That was the path that led to the board work. And so having your friends, male, female, doesn't matter. Tell them you're interested in serving on a committee or on a board, and tell them, you know, kind of what you're interested in that organization they serve with, and they will help open those doors. Almost every time I've been involved in a board, it was through relationships that got me there. And so I want to encourage those of you who are on boards and on committees to reach out to a more diverse group of people in our community and uplift them into these experiences. I have gotten so much more from being in these organizations than I ever have given. And although sometimes you feel like you're giving a lot. But so that's my take on board and committee work. Committee work too is a fabulous way to be involved in our committee, our community, and to be involved.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And thinking, as you mentioned there, Carol, about relationships and about those connections that we make in the community over a lifetime, you know, you may be surprised and inspired by someone seeing something in you that they would like to see brought to the fore on behalf of the organization. Another thing that occurs to me with regard to giving in our community is how interconnected so many of our organizations are, and truly that we all are in the community, but thinking of the arts in particular and all of the touches that occur across the community. I can think of a colleague of mine that is on the board for the opera here. And traditionally, the opera will come in and sing Christmas carols for us, during the holiday season, or enjoying music at the Plains Art Museum and otherwise, and seeing art on the street, and the wraps from the Arts Partnership, for example. But if you could highlight maybe some ways that some of the interconnectedness or how point A leads to point B in your philanthropic journey has occurred.
There is, I'll follow up with that one just because it's right on the tail of what I had said. And there is a woman I had met in Washington, D.C. while I was working there. And, as soon as I'm supposed to remember her name, I forget. It just flies out of me. Anyway, Martha Olson. And she was head of Lake Agassiz Arts Council. Now that relationship goes back many, many, many years to when I was 24 years old. And she moved back to Fargo. I moved to Fargo. And literally 25 years down the line, she calls me up and she said, "Hey, do you want to be on my board?" Which then turned into the Arts Partnership. And so your relationships over a very long period of time when you're involved in the community just mushroom. They're just so interconnected. And I look at the list of people on this call, and so many of you I have met through volunteerism and philanthropy. So those are valued relationships.
And one of a community partnership that I'm involved in right now is a partnership between the Kiwanis organization, our Fargo Kiwanis, and the Fargo Moorhead Symphony. And it is indeed called Welcome to a World Filled with Beautiful Music. And it's just a matter of providing little cards to all parents of newborns in the Fargo Moorhead area. It has a QR code on it. It takes you directly to the symphony website, and you hear beautiful late Baroque, early classical music. And that programming will change. But it is a partnership between a service organization that funded the development and the purchase of the cards and the Fargo Moorhead Symphony. And now we're also then connecting with the hospital birth centers, and we're hoping to expand this program into senior citizen centers, and where again, access to music and the arts is so important. And if an organization like the Kiwanis organization can facilitate that, who better to do that kind of thing? So, and it is, as Carol said, you meet so many people in the process. I loved meeting the heads of the birth centers in the hospital systems at this point in time. It's absolutely extraordinary. I got to know the symphony staff better, and we could bring the power of Kiwanis, to be able to facilitate this project. So community partnerships, engagement between like organizations, it happens in this community, I think, because we see ourselves as a community, and as all of us are important. It's not a competitive kind of thing. So it's collaboration, and partnership.
I think what both Carol and Margie said is so true. The collaboration is so critically important. And I even think my husband and I ended up on the North Dakota Museum of Art board for many years when we were living in Minot. And I met people there that when I moved to Fargo, I knew about the Plains and the Rourke and my experience with the symphony in Minot. I knew there was a symphony in Fargo, and I knew to look for other, like the opera, other things. And so I think that it really extends our reach throughout the state. Yes, local Fargo is important, but I think when you move within the state, it help people, and it helps open you up to more experiences. And I think of the YMCA and the collaboration on some issues with United Way and the food programs we have and the childcare programs we have in the schools, another collaboration. It's really endless in our community.
Yeah, indeed it is. Once you dig in and start getting involved, things just continue to develop and grow. Thinking a little bit about how you come to determine, maybe talking of early in your careers and lives in giving, and what you think of as you determine your legacies. But how did you determine when you were just getting started, how much of your income to give, how much of your time to give? What helped you make those determinations and make those economics work for you and your family?
I think for Dick and me and for our family, in the early days, it was a matter of we followed our giving with the things that we were volunteering for. And as our capacity to give increased, we gave to those organizations. So I think what you're passionate about, that's what you're getting engaged in. And that's why, and that's where your money goes. And as you're able, your capacity grows to give, it's the same organizations. And any really good development director understands that it starts out at one level, and that if you keep people engaged and you meet their expectations, you embrace them, you value volunteers, you value the money, you are building, in the Fargo theater jargon, I guess you would say, you're building audience, and you're building audience for the present, but you're also building audience for the future, and then you're ensuring sustainability.
I think another thing that, and you addressed this, Margie, I agree that's how we really started, giving what we felt we could afford and then the time we could afford. I have to say there were times I know my husband thought I was giving too much time to volunteer work, but I think the other thing I've learned is that the relationship really influences your giving. If I don't know someone at all, or I don't know much about the organization, I'm probably not very likely to either volunteer or give. But if someone I know or admire or respect asks me if I'd give up my time or financial means, I'm far more likely to give. And I know when you read about philanthropy, they talk about that you really are more likely to give to someone you know, even if they are not the organization, but they're encouraging you to give to the organization. So I think that is a huge factor.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And, you know, Brett and I've always been motivated by probably more so vision than crisis. You give in crisis frequently. But long-term donations tend to be based on the vision of where that organization is going. And that takes a long time to cultivate.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't happen when an organization doesn't show up to know you as the person. It's a two-way street. And so it's very important for organizations to understand that we as people are people with hearts that are entwined with their organization. So we care about where that money goes, and we care about how it impacts that vision. because it's all about people. It's not about buildings. It's not about egos. It's truly about the ultimate impact on our world. And so when we have that relationship and that a trusting, slow building of that relationship, that leads you to end up giving more. Crisis, we've all been there, like through the flood, through, different, individuals, crisis with individual people, etc. But it always, for us, it is the outcome of our community and the people in it.
Right, excellent, Carol. And I was thinking some flood analogies in my brain too, as you were talking about longer term vision, but yet adapting to a crisis. And there was a comment a little bit ago as well about working together and how being, integrated locally is that strong collaborative process. It's the sandbaggers mentality, right? We're all coming together for a common purpose, and yet we still have the vision to know that we need to get the long-term project completed as well for the betterment of our entire community. Thinking about where we're at in timing, it's about 4:20, and we have about 10 minutes left here, and I'd love to open it up to the group for Q&A. Any questions from this? As you all stated, great group of folks here in the community.
I'm going to say one more thing while you're waiting for questions. I think another thing, Margie, by the way, I came from a family of 5 girls and no boys also.
Whoa.
Yeah, whoa. But I think of also some of the giving I have done because I wanted to, both in memory of my husband, but also in memory of my parents. Education was so important to them, that all of us be educated and be able to take care of ourselves. That was just a big deal in my household. And so to me, with Concordia, since that's where I went to school, I started a scholarship there in memory of my parents. And so I think that also sometimes affects how we give when we want to honor or remember someone we loved or who was influential in our lives in a way that they would be happy was being helpful.
Julie, that reminds me, one of the first big gifts that Dick and I gave after moving to Fargo was to the Yemcombs.
Oh.
And it was to the ship, because my father was really hell-bent on making sure that we knew that we were Norwegian. That's where we were from. And so we just absolutely had to make a gift to that wonderful ship in his honor. And it's always just been so great for us to walk into that museum and see the ship and know that we played a role in securing its sustainability there. And it was a great way to honor my dad. We could have done it in all kinds of music ways, and we did honor some of Dick's family as well with music recognition kinds of things. But this was just a really fun and wonderful way for us to be able to honor my dad and his Norwegian heritage.
This is Dana Del Val from the Arts Partnership, and I have to first just acknowledge that Margie, Carol, and Julie are among the finest donors in our community. So thank you both for the work and the support that you've given to the arts sector, in particular from my perspective, but also for this incredibly interesting conversation. My question for the 3 of you is really just, the last time Plains held one of these women in philanthropy conversations, I had a real revelation sitting in the audience that often we think it's the men who control the money because it's so often the men who have the position and title in the business. But we know that it's often women at home who are helping to lead or at least co-deciding on those decisions. So my question for you is, how do you like to be approached as donors, as individuals, as a couple, as people who have access to business? And you are, I am sure, approached in many different ways. So how do you like to have those conversations best?
Wow, that's a great question, Dana. That's, wow, that is a good question. And it's something I really hadn't thought about, particularly because Dick and I make these decisions together. And I know that's not always the case, but we do. So I guess even if I'm approached individually, it's a partnership in terms of the decision-making process. So, but that's, therein lies a challenge for the nonprofit organization to be able to identify, if they're going after a major donor, or to figure out what is the most effective and what will resonate the most with the people and be most meaningful to the person that they're asking to give. So yeah, great, interesting question.
Yeah, that is a great question. When my husband was still alive, I think we also, just like you, Margie, we made those decisions together. So it was helpful to be approached together. Sometimes we couldn't both be at a meeting, but that was, I think, the best way for us. Now, of course, I'm alone, so it's easy. You have to approach me alone.
Yeah,
But I think it's an important question, because I think sometimes people call the husband and the woman's almost secondary. And I don't think that's in many cases the best approach.
Exactly.
yeah, I agree. And in our case, my case, each of our businesses is separate. And so those should be treated separately. And then our personal donations, we certainly partner, collaborate, and so it's probably a little more complex on our end because it's a three-prong approach, and sometimes they all align together. But I think the biggest point is you need to approach people. You need to treat them over a long period of time, which I know, Dana, you have. So this my point isn't to you but nonprofits need to work with people over a very long time and be very consistent in their relationship building. And if that inconsistency isn't there, donors leave, or they get interested in something else. And sometimes you just get interested in something else because you're interested in something else. And that's exciting too in life, to find a whole new venture to kind of explore that volunteerism and money giving path. So, but it's all about reaching out and building relationships, and then understanding what that donor, how they want to be approached. But if you don't ask, the answer is always no, right?
Exactly.
Yes, Dana noted, if you didn't notice in the chat, to thank you for your thoughtful answers to that question, and thinking, just wrapping up the comments that the three of you made. Communication came through to me, and consistency, and not making assumptions, I think is really important there. As we come to the top of our hour together here, I would certainly welcome Sandy Thompson or Andy Moss, if either of you would like to join, or both, for any closing comments and thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for that, Becky. Actually, I just got an email from Sandy, and Sandy had Zoom trouble, and apparently at some point couldn't get back in. So, just as I say this, there goes, all I have to do, this is like, when your car breaks down and you bring it to the mechanic, and they're like, no, there's nothing wrong with it. There's Sandy, just like that. All I gotta do is say he's not here.
And the museum's poltergeist.
Okay, okay. Well, anyway,
You can wrap it. You can wrap it, Mouse. Go get them.
I just wanted to say thanks. That's all. I mean, I know how generous all these people are, and certainly Becky, thank you for facilitating the conversation today. Also generous for you, and you work for a very generous organization as well. Much admiration and love for Bell Bank. Margie, your involvements in the community, I knew a lot of, but I didn't know the breadth of it, and that was really exciting for me to hear.
Thank you.
Julie, I only know you through the museum, and you didn't mention your collection, which I realize is sort of like maybe not completely altruistic, right? Because you're buying something.
Right.
However, you're also very intentional about, you have relationships with artists that you are collecting with, and I feel like while that's not quite charitable, it's intentional support of the community. So I really appreciate what you do in all those ways. And Carol is the vice chair of our board. She's not just on our board of directors. She's actually the incoming board chair next year. She gives in so many different ways that I think we all heard from today. And again, much admiration for Carol. Carol is also, she very much likes to challenge organizations. And we cannot have enough of that on boards. You didn't say that, Carol, but like being on a board is not just an opportunity to get involved. It's an opportunity to challenge the organization to become better. It really is. And so anyway, I really appreciate that of Carol. So anyway, and thank you all for coming. I shouldn't have ignored everyone here for coming, but really wanted to pay attention to our gratitude to our host today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I echo Andy. Thanks everyone for participating today. I didn't get to hear much of it because, but it's recorded, so I'll get to spend another hour with it. Thanks, Becky, Julie, Carol, Margie. Waiting for that Culinary Institute, though.
Absolutely. Okay. In my lifetime. Absolutely.
All right.
It was a treat and an honor. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.